In this video, we're going to show you how to make a range of really useful tonal edits using the PhotoshopCurves command. And we can take an image that's initially pretty flat and lacking in contrast and make it much more punchy and saturated. As well as making universal edits across the entire image, we can also make selective edits to certain areas. So you can see here, I've boosted the eyes. So to start, I'm going to go to Curves, and it's called before.jpg, and I'm going to access my Layers panel by going to Window, Layers. Now we could apply the Curves command directly over our layer by going to Image, Adjustments, and Curves, or by using the keyboard shortcut Command-M on a Mac or Control-M on a PC, but it's much better to apply curves as an adjustment layer. And we can do that by clicking the icon here at the bottom of the Layers panel and choosing Curves from the drop-down list. And you'll see how this creates an adjustment layer above my background layer. And this means that our background pixels are preserved, so we're not making any changes that we can't re-edit later. So for example, I could perhaps drag up on my curve line to lighten the image. And then let's just turn off my panel there. And if I decide later on I want to adjust that curve setting that we made, I can simply double click this icon here, and that will bring me back into the curves dialog box, and I can readjust it if I like. So maybe I can drag down to darken the image instead. So if you use adjustment layers, you're not going to be permanently altering pixels, which is really helpful for making changes later on. Of course, as well as being able to adjust the curve setting, you can also take advantage of all the other features that working with layers allows, such as blend mode or opacity or layers masks. So now let's take a closer look at the curves box here, and you'll see that it's dominated by this central section. We can click along this curves line here to add anchor points, and then we can drag these anchor points up or down to lighten or darken the tones. But it's important where we place these points because we can target and adjust different areas of the tonal scale. So you can see here I have 2 points, and this will anchor my line while I make a third point down here in the shadow tones, and I can drag that up or down. And you can see here we're mainly adjusting the shadow areas in the hair. We're not really affecting the skin so much because we've pinned that area of the tonal range in place and we're only affecting the shadows. It becomes important where you place these anchor points. Further to the left and you'll adjust the shadow tones, and alternately we can drag the points further to the right here at the top of the line, and you'll see how we're adjusting the highlight tones instead. And handily enough, we also have a view of the image's histogram here, which is a graphical display of all the tones in the image, from the dark tones on the left to the light tones on the right. So you can see this clump here is probably going to be mainly made up of the tones in the hair here, where we have all these really dark tones in the shadows. And this clump here, which goes right up to the top, is telling me we have a lot of bright tones in this image, which is obviously the background. Now, if you want to get rid of these anchor points, simply click on them and drag them outside the box to remove them. And let's just go back to our starting point because I want to show you another great useful tip for using the curves dialog box. And that's adjusting these 2 points at the bottom here where we have the black point and the white point sliders. And just like the other anchor points, we can drag these 2 points here at the top and bottom of the scale. So you can see if I drag the black point upwards, we're actually lightening the darkest tones, and we can get to a point where there aren't any dark tones left. Alternately, I can drag the white point here this way, and you can see we can lighten up the image completely. Alternately, we can use these 2 points here just to drag the top and bottom points inward. So I'm going to drag the black point inward, and you can see how this adjusts the anchor point there, and the white point adjusts the anchor point there. But if I hold Alt or Option as I drag these points, you can see how the view of my image changes. And this shows me any clip pixels. So you can see as I drag how the view changes. And at the moment, all the areas in white are going to be clipped to pure white. So at the moment, the background is completely pure white and lacking in any detail. And that's fine by me because we really don't need any detail in the background anyway. I'm going to drag to a point where the girl starts to become clipped around there. So now our background is completely white. I can do the same by holding Alt and dragging the black point slider here. And you see the further I drag inwards, the more pixels are going to be clipped to pure black. So you can see if I drag it in a long way, you've lost all the detail in the hair and now it's just a big clump of blackness. So I can hold Alt and drag the black point slider in towards a point where we start to see a few pixels appearing, and that shows me that we're making full use of the tonal range from black to white. And if I just toggle the visibility of that adjustment layer on or off, you can see how with that simple adjustment, we've really improved the tones and given the shadows a lot more depth. Now I'm going to create a separate curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to show you how we can make a classic curves edit on this layer, and this is called the S curve. So you can see how I can make an S simply by dragging one point up in the highlights up here, and then I can click down here and make a second point and drag that down to create a shallow S shape like that. And the more pronounced the S, the more contrast and saturation we can get. So you can see that's obviously too much at the moment, so I'm going to drag that down to create a subtle S shape, something like that I think. And if I toggle that on and off again, you can see how that's really making the image much more punchy. Now, as well as boosting the tones across the image with the S curve, we can also use it to boost tones selectively. So I'm going to hold Command or Control and the space bar and just drag to the right here over the eyes to zoom in. And I'm going to show you how we can boost the eyes by making another curves adjustment layer. So again, I'm going to click the Create Adjustment Layer icon and choose Curves, and you'll see now I have a third curve adjustment. And I'm going to make a very pronounced S shape like that to really boost the contrast, and I'm not worried about the tones around the rest of the image. I'm really only interested in the iris here because that's the part of the image that I want to boost. So I think something like that's going to work well. So let's hide that panel for now. Now you see how the curves adjustment layer comes with a layer mask attached to it automatically, and you see how this layer mask is automatically highlighted here. This means I can invert the white layer mask to black with the keyboard shortcut Command or Control and I. And you'll see how now the mask is fully black, which means that everything on that curves adjustment layer we just made is hidden. So now we can paint with white while this layer mask's thumbnail here is highlighted to selectively reveal the adjustment. So let's grab the brush tool. We'll set white as our foreground color, and we'll just choose a soft edge circular brush tip like that one. And I can use the left and right square bracket keys on my keyboard to adjust the brush tip size. So the left square bracket key will make the brush tip smaller, and the right square bracket key will make the brush tip larger. So you can see how I can simply paint around the iris here to reveal the curves adjustment. And let's just bring my brush opacity up to 100%. And now let's do the same with this eye over here. And if I toggle that layer on and off, you can see how we're able to tweak the contrast in the eyes by selectively making an adjustment and then use a layer mask. Let's just toggle the icon here, and you can see, of course, we can adjust the curve setting that we made there. So if we want to maybe make it a little darker, we can just tweak our curve settings. I think that's looking pretty good. Maybe it's a little too strong at the moment, so we can use the opacity settings on the layer to tone it down and bring it back down to maybe like 60%, somewhere around there. So you see how that makes it a little more subtle and more believable. Now I'm just going to hit Command or Control and 0 and bring me back out to full screen. And I'm going to show you one more thing that's really useful about curves. So let's create another curves adjustment layer. You'll see at the top here we have a drop down that initially says RGB, and we can click there to access different color channels. So for example, let's highlight the red channel. And I can drag the red channel up or down. An upward drag will add red, and a downward drag will add cyan. So just as with the full RGB adjustment on the curve settings, we can adjust individual color channels. So if I want to add red in the highlights, I can drag up here, and then I can pin the rest of the curve like down here. And maybe we can add cyan in the shadows like that. So you can see how we can use these color panels in exactly the same way to add in different color shifts. So let's go to the green channel, for example. We can drag up to add green, and we can drag down to add magenta. So I'm just going to add a touch of green here. It's usually good to be subtle about this. And then again, I'm going to invert the layer mask here with Command or Control and I, and I'm just going to paint with white pretty roughly over the hair to reveal that adjustment, just to tone down the red colors in the hair. So let's just turn off the panel there for now. So you can see how we can use these color channels to make selective color tweaks to different areas of the image. And of course we can double click the icon there and go back to the green channel and maybe just bring it down slightly. So there we go. That's how you can use the Curves command in a variety of ways to improve tones. If we start off with our background image, you can see how first of all we set a black and white point to improve the tonal range. Then we made an S-shaped curve to boost the contrast. Then we added more contrast in the iris there. And finally, we took out some red in the hair.